Tom, we're ready for your second session. Welcome back, Tom Berlin.
All right, friends. So as I said before the break, we're going to move from the why into the how. The biggest thing that I want to say is that this is really a discipleship issue, and it's an issue of the reign of God versus the reign of self. So when I wrote, there are two books that I wrote some time ago. One is Defying Gravity, and this is that struggle that I described earlier in myself, where Karen was happy and I was frustrated. She was in the reign of God. She was embracing it. She was living it. She loved it. I love you, Lord. And I was really focused on me. And so that really helped me to begin to identify this as a discipleship issue, because in many of our churches, what we do is when we talk about money, we say this is a finance committee issue. And we bring the chair of the finance committee up, which is great, because that person's probably a very devout Christian, and that's great. But the difficulty of that construct is pretty soon we start to think that this is about part of our life, not all of our life. Hey, I'm going to pause a second and make an adjustment. The folks in our booth, Dave, can you lower the blinds right here? We've got some people that are struggling with the sunlight in this space, so I think we're going to make it work. Yeah, they're going to take care of it. So when I wrote this book, Defying Gravity, and by the way, if you don't have Defying Gravity at your site, if you're wondering how to buy it, Cokesbury and Amazon. That's how you buy it, Cokesbury and Amazon. This second book is a book called The Generous Church. So when I was talking to Abington about this book, I said, you know what we also need out there is a book about sort of what are the practices that make your church a church that people want to give to. Because sometimes we're in a church and people don't necessarily want to give to your church, and the reason they don't want to give to your church is you are not a church that is exciting. Yeah, I mean, frankly, why would they give to your church? If your church's primary ministry is, we're the church that keeps the lights on. Are you with me? You probably need to make some hard decisions. Hard decisions about your congregational life, because it is not easy for people to feel good if that many of us, remember the earlier statistics, it's not easy for people to feel good about giving to your church if what they perceive, rightly or wrongly, is we're the church that keeps the lights on. And again, that may not be fair, that may not be accurate, that may not be right, but if that's what they perceive, and you control what they perceive. So this book, The Generous Church, is written to talk about that issue. Now, let me talk to you about Tony. Tony's a young man who was asked by his father, not so gently, to leave his home when he was about 18 years old because Tony was a mess. Tony got out into the real world and discovered that life was not nearly as cool as he thought. That in the real world, bills have to be paid and jobs have to be held and work has to be done and you've got to earn your keep. And that was a hard lesson. And after about the third friend said, Tony, you can't live here either, Tony decided he had to have a different way. And he learned at about the age of 19 and a half how to be a real estate agent. Can you imagine that? A friend's father, I think, taught him how to be a real estate agent. And so Tony realized something. He was really good with people when he wanted to be. He had an energetic personality, he was engaging, he actually cared, and he actually kind of liked real estate. And so he got his real estate license and studied for that and did it, and then he began to sell real estate, and pretty soon, Tony, at the ripe old age of 2021, was doing pretty well. And he was earning an income and doing pretty well. And then he decided, wow, wouldn't it be great to invest in what I'm selling? And so he bought a home and he rented it. And he was heavily mortgaged, but he was covering it. And then he went out and he bought another one. And you know what? The bank gave him the money because this home was gaining value so fast that it gave him the leverage to buy this home. And so he bought another home, and then he bought a third one, 22 years old now. He bought a fourth one. Now, I don't remember how many homes Tony said he bought before something very tragic happened, what we call the Great Recession. And suddenly that lost its value, and this lost its value, and this lost its value, and this lost its value. And then Tony learned another very important lesson about life. Nothing comes easy. Amen? And it was about that time that Tony on a Sunday morning was driving down Frying Pan Road right in front of Floris United Methodist Church. And he says, and you can decide if it's true or not, but Tony says he heard a voice of God. And he said, I was driving along, I was praying, I was saying, God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I've got all these obligations. He had a couple cars, he had this and that, he had a wife, he had these things. He said, what am I going to do? And he said, I felt God say to me, turn left and go up that hill. And Tony turned, he describes this is his story. And it's the story, actually, the Defying Gravity book has a small group DVD, and it's not me talking, it's testimonies of lay people who have been living this, right? And Tony on this DVD says, I drove up the church driveway, and when he got here, guess what I was talking about? No, seriously, you can't make this up. It was that time of year, and I was talking about money. Let me tell you something. When Tony walked in, he thought money was a pretty relevant topic for a church to be talking about. Guess what? For Tony, that was not discipleship. For Tony, that was evangelism. Boy, I bet you never thought money could be evangelism, did you? Because here's what the sermon was not doing. The sermon was not saying, give me your money, give me your money, give me your money, give me your money, give me your money. Guilt, 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 guilt. That's not what the sermon was doing. The sermon was saying, how are we living our financial life, and is it in accordance with a Christian way of living? Are we planning? Are we budgeting? Are we saving? And yes, are we giving? But actually, the Sunday he showed up, I didn't ever talk about giving. Because, listen, if you don't help people learn how to plan and budget and save, you're never going to get to giving, because Wesley told us, make all you can, earn all you can. But, oh, by the way, let me stop. Earn all you can by moral means. Just a footnote on that in case you're wondering, all right? And some of you may want to think about that if you are investing money and what you invest in. But that's a thought, not a sermon, as they say. So, earn all you can. What's the next one? Save all you can. And what's the last one? Give all you can. You can't start with give all you can. It doesn't work that way. So, when he walked in, the good news of the gospel is that God did not want to experience the pain he was experiencing. And he came up to me after that sermon, and he was almost emotional. He was excited. He was emotional in his excitement, but he was also almost emotional in his conviction. The Holy Spirit, get this, the Holy Spirit convicted him in church. Come on, isn't that like when does that happen in a Methodist context for 100 years? I mean, it's just so exciting. So I mean, in this church, and I was like, honestly, I went home that Sunday, I was like, woohoo, go Jesus, right? That was like big. And Tony walks up and he goes, what do I do? And we had announced that Sunday, we do financial seminars here from time to time. And so I don't know if it was Financial Peace or the product that comes out of Willow Creek. There are several of those types of things that are solid and good that you're smart enough to figure out what works in your context. But we were going to start like a 6 to 12 week course on that. I think it was Financial Peace. The woman who helped lead the course is sitting here right now, and so she's nodding her head saying yes, that's what it was. And Tony entered that course, and Tony walked up to me every Sunday thereafter and just said, "I feel like my life's being changed." How do we do this? First, we have to talk about it. Second, we have to give people resources. And what a beautiful resource if we can sit in church together in a small group with a able leader and a good curriculum and find a new financial life that will lead us to a new life. One of the reasons that Tony came here originally is that we talked about a relevant topic and then we gave him a resource, but now Tony is a very faithful steward. He's a little bit like my wife, Karen. He bought in. He really did. He's not going back. In fact, he sometimes now helps other people that he meets through his real estate business find financial peace. It's just a remarkable thing that for him it's become sort of a ministry. And I share that with you because what motivates Tony is in part that we're giving people a resource, but what motivates Tony as well is we do good well in this church. We care about our world, we care about our community, we care about other people, and we try to cast a spirit of generosity beyond ourselves, because here's what I want the buzz to be about Floris United Methodist Church. Wow, they're the generous people. Wow, they're the people that show up when you're in need. They're the people that partner with the nonprofits. They're the people that make a difference. They're the people whose people show up and they bring their time and their talent, but they also bring their money. And so part of what we're trying to do is to help people with this generous church. So, how can the church help them? The folks in the booth, I'm forgetting where I've got slides. So do I have a slide that says that? Or did I? There we go. First is, I want to encourage you to make generosity a personal value. Now, pastors, you heard me talk to you just a little while ago. You can't lead people where you haven't been. So if you're never going to get to a place where financial generosity is a personal value for you, I don't think God's going to bless you. Now, maybe I don't contain the Lord's ability or power. I'm just saying, I think when people know that you're on a common journey, they're more likely to join you. Does that feel true to you? So as long as you're giving 1% of your income, probably your church is going to give 1% of its income, as long as you're not willing to talk about this. I know a very committed layperson on another district who went to his pastor and said, I need you to talk about money because I've got to figure out how to manage it. This was a guy who had a really good career, was in many ways at the top end of his career. And you know what he wanted? He wanted spiritual direction. So laity, here's the thing I want to say to you. You want to know one of the reasons that your pastor doesn't talk about money? It's because you punish him or her when they do, or you allow the most dysfunctional voices in your congregation to remain the loudest voices. Everybody hear me? Did I hear an amen to that? I mean, come on, does that happen or not? Does that happen? Yeah, so we get one or two people in the church, so whenever the pastor talks about money, get way up here and they walk around and say, did you hear what they talked about? Did you hear what there she goes again. It's always about money, money, money. And would somebody, as a layperson, please look at that dysfunctional human being and say, can I just tell you that I like it when the pastor talks about money? Can I just tell you that I like it when the pastor encourages me in my giving? I like it when the pastor tells us we ought to be budgeting. I like it when the pastor tells my children they need to save some money and not spend it on junk. And if you don't like it, usually you can tell when the pastor's going to do that for about 3 weeks in a row, don't attend. And then come back when you are joyful because the Lord does not like an unjoyful giver. Amen? And laity, if you don't back us up, we can't do this on our own. But what if instead lay leaders and finance chairs and church council chairs went to the pastor and sat down and said, how can we help you? How can we help you? How can we be partners in ministry together? Because the functionality of the church always rests with key leadership. Amen? And you need to decide right now, and you've come today how did you get here, right? Here's what I know about you. You are some of the most generous people in our church. Pastors and laity who show up to these events are almost always some of the most generous people in our church. And they think it really matters, and that's why they come. But you will notice at your event and here at Floris, the seats are not full. Amen? Did you notice that? That may be because I am not charming enough. That may be. But it also may be that is what Grace said. It's a hard topic. So, lay leaders, church council chairs, finance chairs, members at large, church fathers and mothers, you know who you are. Those of you who have power and agency, would you please come to your pastor's office and gently and kindly say, how can we help you? And if your pastor says, I just can't talk about it, here's a couple things you might say. Why not? Let's talk about that. Why not? How can we help you? Do you need training? Do you need to buy some books? Do you need to watch some videos? Do you need to read? Do you need time away? Do you need us to come up and do it? Do you want us to do it for you? Because I know 3 lay people who would be happy to talk about that if you feel like you just can't. But can you encourage your pastor not to be cowardly? We must be brave to do kingdom work. We must be brave. We must be courageous. Remember what Joshua was told. Be strong and of good courage. You've got to have that moment. Remember when Esther's uncle looked at her and said, who knows, maybe God put you here for this time. And she was like, no. And he was like, yeah, probably. It's always about the courage. And there's something unique in money that requires this. So let's work together. Now, here's the other thing. How can we help them? Make it a personal value. Second, offer them a worthy investment. A worthy investment. Friends, if you're the church whose motto is, we keep the lights on longer than anybody, that's just not worthy. I don't want to invest in you. And I know what you're saying, but Tom, we're a small church. We're not a wealthy church. We're this church. We're in an urban context. We're in a rural context. Listen, I was on a district in Nebraska 3 weeks ago, and Nebraskan United Methodist churches have a very hard problem. Their agricultural economy is shrinking every year to large agribusiness. The price of corn has dropped from like 8 to 3 because of ethanol not being produced as it once was. And they're like, we just don't have money. And I said, what more important topic to talk about than how to help people budget and save and think about money? And guess what? Some of their farmers are having to make hard decisions about whether it's time to combine with other farms or sell their farm and do something different. Wow, that's an opportunity for job training. What if the church ran job training right in their building? Because we have a situation in this site, in this church, where we actually do job training through a program of the Arlington District, Just Neighbors. And we are training people how to be personal health assistants. And they come in and they're trained, and they're trained in English as a second language, and they're trained in health issues. And guess what? When they leave that training, every single one of them is employed. You want to bless somebody's life? Start thinking about their economics, because nothing helps a family more than that. And when they leave here out of that training, they not only get an income, they get benefits. And some of them for the first time are saying, I've got insurance. Come on, can I hear an amen on that? All right, so when I was out there with those folks in Nebraska, and they were saying, but Tom, we're small churches, but Tom, we're in this shrinking economy. What I said is, well, then there's your ministry. Because right now in that community, couldn't they think of anything more important than how to help people make an economic transition? And what if the church because guess what? Monday through Friday, most churches, not a whole lot's happening unless you've got a preschool. Is that true where you are? So we've actually got sometimes $1 million to $5 million worth of asset sitting, not working for anybody. So what if we brought the people in that way? Are you with me now how different this sounds than the usual gimme, gimme, gimme? What I want you to do is change lives. So you have to start thinking, and either Brad or Brian, one of you said at the very beginning of this, translate this into your own circumstance. Translate it into your circumstance. It's not the case that if you're small, you're not vibrant. It's just not true. Vibrant churches are in every size dimension. Size is not a predictor of vitality. Can I tell you that? Why? Because I've been in the smallest churches in the Virginia Conference, and I've been in the largest churches in the Virginia Conference, and there's vitality all across the spectrum as long as it's this. Our mission is to keep the lights on. Not vital. Do you remember VW? Volkswagen had a engine. A carburetor, actually, they came out with several years ago, and they said, this is the cleanest carburetor any human being has ever produced. In fact, you've got almost zero emissions coming out of your tailpipe. Zero emissions. It's just amazing. Our daughters love environmental things. They're very focused on health and good living and stewardship of the earth. And so they have some friends that are into that as much or more than they are. And oh my goodness, one of Catherine's friends, one of my daughter's friends came over, and she had her new VW, and she pulled in and said, wow, that's a good looking car. And she said, I know, Mr. Berlin, this is so fabulous. This car is an engine, and it's almost zero emissions out of the back of this car. Isn't that amazing? I said, what's the gas mileage? She said, it's really good. Oh, that's great. Zero emissions. And see, what happened is the company's mission matched her personal mission, right? Now, don't you want the church's mission to match your members' personal missions? What would that mission be? It would be about, do we share Jesus Christ with others? Do we focus on evangelism in tangible ways that matter? Or do we just talk evangelism? So you can talk it, or you can go try to start a new church site, which is really expensive, by the way, but it can be done. You can talk it, or you can figure out how to improve your ministry to such a point that you begin to attract people. There's just 100 ways to do this. But wouldn't you want a church where people who wanted others to know Christ, you help them do that? Would you like that? Yeah, wouldn't you like a church that blessed the poor? Does the Bible talk about blessing the poor? Yes or no? Come on, give me some feedback. Yes or no? Yes. Wouldn't you like to be a part of a church that walked out in the community and said, wow, at the elementary school, no more than 1 mile away, we've got the second highest concentration of students on free and reduced lunch. And maybe, just maybe, we ought to walk into the principal's office and say, how can we help you as we did 18 years ago? And I want to tell you, we cut a check the other day for $43,000 and handed it to the principal. And that's not because we're a wealthy church, that's because we're a generous church. Because you can have churches of this size and this location that never cut that check. You know why? Because they're just not generous, because they've not figured out how to match the mission of the church to the mission of the members. Because here's what people want in a church. They want vibrancy. They want deeper discipleship. They want to share Christ. They want to bless the poor. They want to do acts of justice. That's what we want. And we kind of tell people that when we put a cross on the sign. We are telling people that's our logo. That's what we're about. The same way VW said, hey, we are all about environmental stewardship. We've got the best carburetor. And then this professor from West Virginia University, God bless him, he got nosy. He just started scratching his head, looking at that engine going, I just don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. And he began to investigate and tore the engine apart. You know what he found? Naughty, naughty, naughty VW. They put computer chips in that engine that fooled the emission, the thing that measured the emissions. So the machine, when it linked into the engine, it wasn't that it was nearly zero emission. It was actually really high emissions compared to other cars that VW had produced, unusually high, but they had this little computer chip in there that fooled the monitoring system in the United States and in Europe. Now let me ask you something. How do you think my daughter's friend who bought that car feels about Volkswagen today? How do you think she feels? Good or bad? Bad. Happy or angry? Yeah, let me tell you something about my daughter's friends. You do not want to get them angry. They do anger really, really well. You may have noticed that on their Facebook page in the past few months. You may have noticed that. They do anger, express it very high. And I want to tell you something. When she found out that she had been duped, she was so angry and so disappointed. Now, let me ask you something. Do you think she'll be buying a VW anytime soon? No. Now, here's what I want to ask you about your church. Because it's a question I have to wake up and ask about the one I serve. What's your brand? What's your brand? Is your brand, I can demonstrate to you that we are helping people know Jesus Christ for the first time. We are discipling all ages, cradle to grave. We're going to help you in your sanctification. To the best extent we can, we're going to bless the poor, and we're going to do acts of mercy and justice. Frankly, if I just made that my list, for most of the people that attend here, that would be enough. Now, we've added a few other things. We're trying to get our church to look like our elementary school. And can I tell you something? That is hard work. Intercultural stuff, that's hard work. Multiracial stuff, that's hard work. We have not figured that one out, but we are working. Last night, I was having dinner. I have a Latino family that lives north of Leesburg. That is a 35-minute drive when there is no traffic. And we were having dinner out there, dinner for 8. We had these groups, and we were out in their home. They're like, we're so happy we're in your home. I said, I'm so happy to be in your home. I'm just wondering why on earth you travel to Floris United Methodist Church. She said, because we believe in the mission. Man, God could not have done anything kinder for me yesterday. I was tired. I mean, honestly, I came home from Africa, 2 funerals, funeral Thursday, funeral Friday, being with those families, sermons coming, this happening today. I was like, when Karen picked me up here and we drove out to Leesburg, I was like, I do not want to do this. And when she said that, I was like, oh, thank you. So, you've got to offer them a worthy investment. Okay? And then finally, you've got to identify the competition. And the competition is not the Red Cross and their alma mater and the nonprofit in your community. That's not the competition. We want them to give to other things. That's great. That's what generous people do. The competition is materialism and lack of planning. So make sure you write that one down. The competition is materialism and lack of financial planning. Because the generous people are the people committed to planning. These are people who actually know what their savings is. They know how to invest money. Those are always the most generous people. And by the way, the church has often been guilty of acting like that is bad stuff. Like you're greedy if you plan. You're greedy if you budget. It's not true. Look at the data on giving. The people that are doing the most hard work on financial management are the most generous. Why? Because you can't give generously by giving what's left over. That's why. So, in our church, we also did this. We decided we wanted to help them and we wanted to give them an experience. And there's nothing like an experience. Now look, I love a sermon. I do. I love a good sermon. My goodness. That's why when Grace was preaching up here earlier, I was just like, be still my heart, a good sermon from this pulpit. I was so pleased. You know, I was like, frankly, Grace, I was just hoping not many people from Floris actually heard you for other reasons, but that's my insecurity, and don't worry about that. But I was hearing that good sermon. But friends, pastors know something. What's the shelf life of a sermon? Day. Somebody just said a day. Anybody else have another? Maybe a couple days. Every so often, somebody remembers a sermon of mine long term. Most of the time, they don't. And why do I invest a lot of time in that? But if you tap into learning theory, what you learn is you've got to combine the spoken word with the experience that they have. And so if we think holistically about how human beings actually learn, and this is a gift again from my wife Karen, she studies learning theory because she's in education and works with superintendents all the way down to school staff in this area. So we did something else, and that's why give them a book. You don't have to give them the book I wrote. It is one of your options. But ask people to buy a book. I was just talking to one of the pastors during the break, and she said, so do you get the church to buy the books? Usually not. Usually I say to people, would you go buy the book? Listen, Cliff Christopher's Rich Church, Poor Church shifted financial practices, shifted the culture at Floris United Methodist Church, because my finance committee read it and my church council read it, and then our clergy all read it and our key staff read it, and then we all said, what do we want to do here? And we did it, and it changed the culture. Was that worth the $12 a book I spent? Yes or no? Absolutely, friends. The reason that some of you are like, but we can't buy a book, stop listening to the chickens. Cheap, 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 cheap. I'm not trying to sell you a book. I'm telling you that if you can get your people to have an experience. So what we wanted is for people to have the opportunity to have not only a book, but a small group. And look, if you do a financial thing and you do a small group, you're not going to get 80% of your church. You're going to get 20%, but the 20% you get matters. A lot of times we don't do anything. Sometimes we don't do anything in church because we act like size is the only thing that matters. Numbers are all that matters. Well, numbers are really important. But remember what Jesus said about a little leaven in the loaf? You got to start with your little bit of leaven. So if you can just assemble pastors, if you're in a church of 60 on Sunday or 50 on Sunday, and you can get 5 people to sit with you for 4 weeks and do a small group and read a book, that's the leaven. That's 10%. Do you know how hard it would be for me to get 10% here? So if you're a small church, this is a little guide. Always measure in percentage, never measure in true number. Seriously, that's what I used to do. Because we had 45 in worship, and when I got 5 people to show up, I was like, we were over 10%. How did the big church do? They never did that. They could never pull that off. That's because I was awesome. That's what I used to think. Well, I wasn't, but you just got to know, seriously, you need to honor and value your good work. And so do a little leaven in the loaf, but give people a small group experience. Second thing that we did is we gave people sermons, books, small group curriculum. And this book talks about 4 things. It talks about the culture of more, and it talks about financial gravity. And I forgot to tell you this in the first phase. Here's the image of this book, Defying Gravity. There's a gravity that you feel right now that you don't even know is around you, and it's the gravity to spend money. It's consumerism. And it's going to pull you out, and if you've got a phone and you go and look at something for your phone, what's going to pop up? Ads. And when you go to the mall, it's going to sort of... You ever walk down the mall and just found yourself like you're in the mall to buy a birthday gift for your spouse, and you know the store and you know the gift, but as you're walking, have you ever noticed you just get sort of like, oh, look at the shiny things, right? And so it's the financial gravity. So we talk about that experience. And when we talked about the experience, what we found is that people said, yeah, that's true. So we talk about that here. We talk about generosity and stewardship and tithing. We talk about making a budget. And we talk about learning to be a steward as a way of life. Now, part of what you want to do is give people an experience. Look at this next slide. We want to give them daily tasks. And I forgot to bring the cards with me, but there are actually cards with this thing. And we gave people, we tried to say every week, I challenge people in this church to clean out. So the first week of a 4-week series, I challenged them to clean out a drawer, a closet, or a room in their home. A drawer. Like just because I'm not trying to get you to fix your home, I'm trying to get you to have an experience. So raise your hand if you've got a junk drawer in your home. Just raise your hand. Okay, we all have them, right? So I just said if it's nothing else but the junk drawer. But if you can do a closet, that's great. If you can do a room, oh, Amy, come bring those up here. This is Amy Slanker-Smith. Amy actually has a website on simplicity, right? What's it called? No, what's it? She's going, don't talk about me. No, what's your thing on simplicity called? Say it really loud. Simply Enough is her website. She's a member of our church. And if you go to Simply Enough, just Google it, you're going to find Amy's website. And she talks about this simple living, and she actually brought the cards, and I really appreciate it. These cards give you something to do every day. Sometimes it's a Bible verse to read. Sometimes it's clean out the drawer. One thing is like, choose whether you're going to clean out a drawer, a closet, or a room. Choose what things you're going to clean out of the drawer, the closet. Take the things out of the drawer. We broke it down into little tiny pieces. Do you know why? The experience you're trying to give people is a hard experience. My parents just moved out of the home they lived in for about 40 years. Oh, no, actually. I would be younger if that was true. For over 50 years, they lived in this home. And my goodness, when they moved out, how hard it was to go to a house a third of the size. Are you with me? Oh, after 50 years, 50 plus years. And there was something that happened. Some things we suddenly realized were treasures. And some things we suddenly realized weren't. So that's the experience I wanted people to have at the church, is to figure out what are the treasures in your life and what's the stuff. At the end of a month, we encourage people to do this week after week, and at the 4th week, on a Saturday, was what we called the Clean Out Challenge. And we got everybody in the church on the same day to bring the stuff they had cleaned out. Now, we did this in our church parking lot, and we've got enough people that work. We had a Salvation Army truck here. We had a recycler here of things. We had somebody here who did electronic recycling, so you could bring your old computer screens and TVs. We had somebody up here who did shredding. They did box shredding. You know, that's so much fun to get that because and so again, things like that. The activities of here guided people to that experience. Now I know what you're thinking. If you're like, Tom, I'm a small church, we'd never do that. Then get 2 or 3 churches to go together and do it. Or don't do it on your parking lot. On a Saturday, challenge everybody, tell them the location of the Salvation Army, tell them the location of the shredder, tell them the location of the electronic, and get them to drive to those locations. Make it like a scavenger hunt or something. I don't know, you'll be creative. My point is, quit saying, we can't. You can. You may have to get some people to do it together. You may have to do it in a different way, but you can. You have power, friends. So use it. So the people are on a Saturday afternoon beginning at 1 o'clock. They're driving up to that top lot that's right here. Sorry, you all can't see that, but there's a parking lot out there. And they drive up and they have these stations. We had volunteers, lay people who made these stations. And in the stations, like people stop their car and they pull out their old computer. And they've been wanting to get rid of that computer for how many years? You've got this computer, right? And they're like, whoo, and they just drop it. And then they go over to the Salvation Army, and they drop it off. And then they go to the 123 junk truck, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. The guy goes, put it on my truck. And one woman takes the last thing out of her van. She had a whole van full of stuff. And she puts it on the Salvation Army trunk in the corner of that parking lot. And I'm standing on the edge of the parking lot. And she goes, woohoo! I'm sorry if that hurts your ears out there, but oh my goodness. And I'm standing on this parking lot sidewalk and I'm watching her, and here's what I thought. When she bought that at Target, did she have that level of joy when she bought it? Are you with me? And you know what that teaches you? Things always disappoint. Things are finite. Things are relative. And she actually, I believe, had more freedom when she simplified than when she consumed. So then we had that experience on a Saturday afternoon, and then we came back here on Sunday. And on Sunday, I just said, how did the Clean Out Challenge go for everybody? Here's some things I observed, and I told that story, and heads were nodding all over the place. Now, did 100% of the congregation do that? What do you think? No. But I'll tell you, I think it may have been over 50%. Do you think that's fair? Yeah, I mean, it was hovering maybe above, below. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter to me. Do you remember what the Lord said to Ezekiel? The Lord said, if you know something and you tell it, it's on them. But if you know something and you don't share it, it's on you. So if I don't get 100% participation, it's not on me. What's on me is the experience. But I'll tell you what, for those who did it, I believe they'll never forget it. And we've got families in the church who are now saying, I've taken on a more simple lifestyle. Now, I don't believe that's because of Tom Berlin. I think that's because we as a church have started to talk more and more about generosity. And what a lot of people are doing is like, I want to get there, but I've got to get into a new life to get there. My goodness, if I can just get 30% of us to do that. What percentage of the church in any church in America tithes? 9.4. If I can move 9.4 to 15, can you imagine the financial difference that would make in their lives? Can you imagine what would be happening? And what would be happening, frankly, in our ministry? It would be unbelievable. So the other thing that we did is we used videos, and you saw 2 of the videos already. They're on this flash drive. They're on here. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, but how would we show them? Friends, before we had video screens, I used to drag televisions in the middle of the chancel and say, I want to show you something. And I didn't do it every Sunday, but I did it on occasion. Why? Because I wanted people to have an experience, and you live in a video culture. So to the extent that you can produce some of that and do it in a creative way, I'm all for it. And if it looks a little clunky because you're in a sanctuary not designed for that, people will forgive you. They really will. If you can have good audio, they will forgive you the rest. So, by the way, that's not from me. That's from a guy that makes videos. Charlie Kendall, who made those 2 videos, is a member of our church. And he works for Geico, he works for big companies and BMW. While you and I sit in an office, Charlie straps himself to a front of a pickup truck and goes down the Blue Ridge Parkway filming a BMW. Come on, is that not like the best job ever? And so Charlie says, Tom, don't worry about the video, worry about the audio. If they can hear it, they'll forgive you the rest. Well, these are done by Charlie, and so you're going to get video and audio. Because I really believe in quality. I think that's important. So what's my point? My point is this. If you can give people an experience that links with a sermon or a series of sermons, you're far more likely to get them to embrace the thing you're talking about. So you'll know what works in your context. Everything I just described is on the data stick. I am not trying to sell you a product. I know it's going to be tempting right now to think he's trying to sell me a product. I'm not. I'm trying to help you get to the resources that'll help you. Because I do this every day. I am a pastor. I'm not anything else. I'm just a pastor in a church. And finding the resources is the key. And I use other people's stuff all the time, right? I get up every morning and pray that Adam Hamilton will have one more good idea. I really do. I'm just like, Go at 'em, right? So to the extent that I've got a good idea that helps you, take it, use it. I hope it helps you. So that's what I'm all about. So next question. Can we put up the next slide? Here's a question. Why don't pastors and churches like preaching on the topic, having conversations about the topic, leading financial campaigns, or following best practices related to money and generosity? Why is this so hard? Some of you are saying right now, but wait a minute, didn't Grace talk about that? Wait a minute, Tom, haven't you already addressed it? Yes, I know it's repetition. That's what I'm doing. Okay, you've got 3 minutes. Go. Answer those questions. Okay. Can I hear from the folks at Floris? Again, those of you who are on the sites, during the Q&A, you've got the methods to get things into us. Because this is going to happen so fast, I'm not going to do that this time. My apologies to you. The good news is you only had to drive under an hour to get to where you are, and that's the upside of the experience. So can I hear some things in here? What are some of the reasons that this is so hard for people? Fast, friends, come on. Share yours, Brian.
We don't want to hurt someone who's in crippling debt and have them.
Brian says, hey, there are people in his church that are just in crippling debt, and it's really hard. And when we talk about money, we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to make them feel guilty. We don't want to just, it's already hard. We don't want to make it harder, I think is what you're saying, right? Yeah. Raise your hand if that's true, even on the sites. Raise your hand if you ever have that concern that you're going to hurt somebody. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's because you have a compassionate heart. And I want you to have that. So here's the deal. If you speak on giving, you can't start with giving. You've got to start with, isn't money important to our lives? How might we live? And look, when I know there's a hurt in my congregation, I don't say, Fred over there is in crippling debt. We don't do that, right? Like if you do that, you're just a bad person. But so what you do is you say, wow, I was reading in the paper the other day that this percentage of Americans are experiencing crippling debt. I have to assume if that's true in our country, it's probably true in our church. And if you're in that situation, can I just tell you something? As your pastor, if I can help you find somebody who's really good with money to teach you some best practices, if I can help you find a book to read, if I can help you, if I can just pray for you, I would love to do that. Because if you're in crippling debt, I bet it affects every minute of your life. So what I'm encouraging you to think about is if it's hard for that reason, and it is for obviously a lot of us, begin to minister to it and see it as your ministry. Because if somebody's in crippling debt, it's all they think about. When they're at home, when they're at work, when they lay down at night, it's all they think about. How can they do anything else if that's on them? So let's help them, but let's also give them a path. By the way, I do not do financial consulting. I am not the guy you want to come to and say, my checkbook's a mess. No. I don't do any of that. But what I can do is help you get to the resources that might help you, some of which are located out in the community, and they're nonprofit organizations that will help you do that. So I am not suggesting that pastors start doing financial planning. That is not, everybody hear that? Good. I just want to clarify that's on the recording. So the next thing, what's another reason that people find this stuff hard? Yeah, they're spiritually not in a place to give. In other words, it's sort of like I describe myself, right? And I'll tell you, you know what this thing about giving and tithing, especially if you're going to challenge people to tithe, that's kind of big, right? And the reason is it's going to require you, here's the deal, if I challenge you to give generously, I'm asking you to change your life. Whoa, wait a minute, did you hear that? I'm asking you to transform your life. But what else is my job? What else? I mean, when they put their hands on me, when the bishop put the hands on me and said, take thou authority. Isn't that what they asked me to do? So church leaders, lay clergy, that's your job. That's your job. Change a life. Push. And that's why you're going to have to be ready for the tension. The tension's going to come with this. You're going to have some unhappy people, all right? Eventually, you're going to be there so long that they're going to leave. They left. You know what they realize? He's never going to leave. She might be here another 2 years. She might do this 2 more years. He's going to keep talking about this regularly. Eventually, they leave. When it's really bad, but some of them change. Some of them find new life. Some of them realize that their stuff is never going to matter. Some of them really change. So what's another reason that people find this hard?
They don't believe it's best for them, and I think partially because their pastors don't believe it's best for them.
He said they don't believe it's best for them in part because their pastors don't believe it's best for them either. Is that what you said? Similar to that? Yeah, so that's that whole thing about yoking arms and walking into the future together and saying, let's make a commitment. Friends, the building that this is being held in is the source of the largest amount of generosity that my wife and I have ever made. Why? We just had to. There's no other way to get here. And I really do believe that after I'm long dead and gone, I don't know if I'll be the pastor here another year, another couple years. I do know one thing. I will not always be the pastor here. But I invested in it because I have the crazy hope that people will come to know Jesus in this space, in this ministry for years and years to come. There's nothing that brings me more joy than when somebody, the house we had dinner in last night I was telling you about, she was baptized, that baptismal font over there moves. She was baptized right here. Her son standing around her. Her husband was baptized, and her sons were. The 5 of them were baptized all on the same day. There is a picture of her being baptized that hangs in our associate pastor's office right now. Why? Because that's what we celebrate the most. Somebody came to know the salvific change of Jesus Christ. Boy, am I willing to invest in that. You know? And I am giving my life to that great cause like you are. And let me tell you something, smart people like you and me, we could have done something different. We had options, but we chose this calling because it claimed us. And so why, if I feel that way about my vocation, would I not feel that way about my money? Okay? So my point is, pastors and laity have what I call the reluctance. And every time they think, boy, to do this, we're going to have to really launch into a financial conversation, you can feel the reluctance, and it's like, I don't know. Pastors creating, hey, Grace, did that take you a long time to get that sermon? Did you sharpen the pencils a lot? Like, oh, maybe if I just sharpen the pencil one more time, and wow, lined paper or unlined paper? I'm not sure where I want to start, right? I mean, we do those games, right? Why? It's the reluctance. You can just feel it. At this church, we're going to need to think about another financial campaign very soon. I'm not all that thrilled about it. It'll be about the 5th one I've done, if my number is right. And guess what? We're going to do that. We're going to do it joyfully because we're going to be blessing some people. In fact, some of those people I'm going to tell you about when we come back after the Q&A. So this reluctance is something you have to address. So as I said earlier, one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is not just learn how to preach the sermon, but learn how to change the culture. So for us, what did that mean? We got good books and we read them together as a church council, as a finance committee, and nobody read more than me. I have got a list in there of books that I've read from a variety of authors about money and churches and personal stewardship, and frankly, that is not the exhaustive list of the books that are on my shelf. It's just the ones I felt like I wanted to tell you about. I've done a lot of study on this thing because I'm trying to figure it out for me and for others. And when I talk about it, I want it to be fresh. I want to have new ideas. I want to have new illustrations. I don't want to give them the same old meal just warmed up from last year, and that is hard. And my folks know in leadership here on a staff parish committee, sometimes I go away and do sermon planning for at least about 4 or 5 days a year, different times, and they give me that time. They do it joyfully. They don't ping me about it when I get back and say, well, there's a preacher fishing again. No, actually didn't fish. Sat up late at night, worked. Why? Because I want to help my people have a new experience around this topic. So I want to encourage you, clergy and laity, do that. When we read the books, we realized we had to change some of our practices because you've got to have the best practices, okay? And you've got to be the people who know how to push investor confidence up, Okay? So investor confidence has to do with how is the offering taken? Friends, if your offering is taken and then somebody puts it in a grocery bag and takes it home and counts it, and then takes it to the bank on Monday, one person, and a new person hears that that's your practice, are they going to give you money or not? No, and I know what you're thinking, but you know, Joanne's been doing that for years. Like, Joanne's trustworthy, and we all know Joanne, and she wouldn't steal anything. Friends, you've got to have best practices. So we really pay attention. We do 4 worship services a week here. We make sure that people sit and count that money, more than one person, not related, all the things that you do in your church. But friends, some of you out there don't have best practices just about counting your offering, okay? We believe that people should be able to give electronically. I know in some of the churches I'm talking to, you're like, Tom, we've barely even got a website. I was in Nebraska, and I sat with churches with 30 people on a Sunday who had electronic giving. 30 people. And I went to the pastor, like, you really have 30 people, but you've got electronic giving. Why do you do that? And she said, because when it snows in Nebraska, the offering goes to 0. So I needed electronic giving. But aren't you worried that people are going to run up their credit card debt? That's what people say to me. Friends, I have seen people become poor for a lot of reasons. Can I tell you one reason I've never seen anybody become poor over or overextended? Giving to their church. So the mythology that's out there that like, no, we can't do electronic giving, they'll become poor. Lord have mercy, if you find that person, bring them to me and I'll help them pay the bill. I'm like, wow, it just never happens. So let's quit pretending things happen that don't happen. Listen, 42% of our people give electronically now. I think it's actually to 46%. We think we can push that number into the 70s. Now, why is that important? Right now, when you're giving record, it looks like this. There's variance, right? And then there's Easter, right? And there's all this variance. What you would be well served to have is a predictable line of giving. And you are going to lose a little bit of that money to the electronic fees and all that, depending on how you do it. But it's a small amount. I'm telling you, it's made a huge difference for us. It's a best practice. We even have a giving kiosk out here. Did you notice that? Some of you who are here in this building, we have a giving kiosk. I wouldn't say that's not the first thing I would do. But if you're looking for an array of best practices, it might be one to think about. You actually do it with an iPad and a cube now. So it's not even that expensive anymore. But why do we do that? Because one of our biggest offerings here is Christmas Eve. We took Mike Slaughter's idea. It's not your birthday, you know. Thank you, Mike Slaughter. It's somebody else I pray for. Like, go, Mike. Come up with one more good idea. You know that it's not your birthday. Man, that helped us on Christmas Eve. We give away all the money. Our people get up on Sunday on Christmas Day, and they tell me one of the first things they do is go online because we have people who count the offering and post it. And when our families get up on Christmas morning, they look at it and they're like, wow, the church raised this much money this year. And many of them they tell me this, first gift of Christmas. It's one we gave Jesus. Because Mike taught us it's not your birthday. Well, Christmas Eve, I've got all these people out here. You know what people don't carry much anymore? Checkbooks. They're like, but I got this piece of plastic, so I do this. I say this every Christmas Eve. I'm like, I know some of you are thinking, wow, after hearing what that offering's going to, I want to be a part of that. Isn't it a shame I don't have a checkbook? And then I say, here's the good news. If you walk right out there's a giving kiosk that'll take that little piece of plastic. You feel free to do that. Now, you may be thinking, Tom, do you really do that? Do you really talk about money like that? Yeah, I sure do. You know why? Macy's is happy to do it. Giant is happy to do it. Barnes & Noble is happy to do it. Amazon is happy to do it. Why would I not give people the opportunity to bless others? But when we first put in the giving kiosk, I had a couple people come to me and they were like, well, this just feels commercial. Yeah, like your whole life. Right? You don't say to your bank, don't put that debit machine up on the wall because that just feels commercial. Are you with me? We have to be in the economy that we're really in. And frankly, we're in a largely a debit and credit-based economy. Well, we're an electronic economy. That might be the best way to say that. So what I want you to think about is this: good reporting. Good reporting means transparency. Good reporting means if I'm a member of the church, I have access to the information. We don't give our budget out. We don't post our budget online. Anybody who wants to know about our budget at Floris, all they have to do is call. But we're not going to just hand them a budget. We're going to have a conversation. I don't want to give you information. I want to give you a conversation with information, because budgets need to be interpreted. But you can see it all. You can see what the pastors make. You can see all that stuff if you're a member here. So we have transparency, and we have really good, and a treasurer who has her act together so well that she just makes life easy. And then last is make it easy to give. I just talked about that. So what I want you to think about is, if you want to be a generous church, here are the big items. You have to have a brand that people want to give to. Okay? So what that means is high communication. When we do things at Hutchinson Elementary, we talk about that in my weekly e-note. When we help the homeless shelter like we are about to do, we're going to put that in the e-note. When I go to Sierra Leone, Africa, I'm going to talk about it on Sunday, and we talk about the children's center and the hospital we support. And sometimes I'll talk it to death, but I'm going to keep talking it, because vision, as Bill Hybels says, vision leaks. The vision bucket has holes in it, and you've got to keep pouring vision into it, because it just keeps seeping right out the bottom. So we keep doing that, and you've got to talk, report, tell them the story, so that when they talk about their church, they don't talk about, well, they're fighting in the church about this, or they're fussing about that, or did you hear the denomination's falling apart? When people here talk about their church, I want them to talk about who we blessed, who we helped, and how their life is changing as a result. Are you with me? That's really important. So if you're going to do this, you've got to have that brand. Can you put that last slide back up? You've got to have that brand thing, this generous church, and you've got to be willing to have the conversation. And by the way, if you are that church that's like, our mission is to keep lights on, time to call your superintendent. And I really mean this. It's time to call your superintendent and say, could you help us? You're the mission strategist, and we feel like we've had a mission loss. Can we have a conversation? That's what functional organizations do. So do that. Then get your reporting going well. You've probably already got that in place, because Methodists tend to be pretty good at that. And then finally, give people ways to give and means to give that make it easier for them, not easier for you. Here's what I found. Stuff that's easier for them is easier for us. Electronic giving, wow, is that easier than counting check by check by check? If we've got 42% of our people giving electronically, you understand that we've diminished the amount of time we have to pay someone to count those properly. That's a good stewardship thing. So you don't just count the bank fee, you count the savings. So that's it. Let's stop there. All of that is found in this book, this little thin book called The Generous Church. Friends, I know what you're thinking. You're like, I've never read a book that thick. That'll take way too much time. And wow, when I hear Tom talk, he is so deep and intellectual, I could never get through. It's like Karl Barth up there. No, it's not. This is a guy that's a pastor of a church. The book is thin. It's easy to read. Why? Because it's not neuroscience, all right? It's just sort of good practices to think about. So you can do this, and your people can do this, and you can buy the books or ask them to buy them. And it doesn't have to be these books, but it ought to be something that starts your conversation. But here's the beauty. That data stick has me talking to your finance chair, and I do about 6 sessions talking about best practices. Here, why do you think I bought Cliff Christopher's book and had my church read it? Let me tell you why. If they didn't like it, who were they angry at? Who were they angry at? Cliff, right? And Cliff did a 5-Talent Academy up here. It was after he did the 5-Talent Academy, I was like, I got Cliff's book. And Cliff can say some stuff kind of harsh, right? He's like out there. And I was like, and then when they complained about something, I was just like, yeah, I don't like Cliff either. But that thing he said, that kind of made sense, right? And if Cliff was here, yeah, I would say that right in front of him. And so the same thing, like show the video of me talking about best practices, and it's like an 8-minute video. And then if they're like, but I don't like that guy, he's like boring, or he's too thin, or whatever, you just be like, me either. But that thing he said, right? And put it on me, because I don't care. I really don't. If I can help you, I'm for it. But if you don't like it, I'm fine. You know why? I'm just telling you what changed my life. I'm just telling you what changed my life. I'm just telling you what sanctified me. And if that helps you, well, then to God be the glory. But now it's lunch, and look at me, I'm only 1 minute over. That's That's a miracle at Floris Church.
Friends, let's show our appreciation for Tom Berlin. Thank you, Tom, so much. We're really grateful for this excellent teaching and this conversation that's so needed in our lives and in our parishes where we serve and lead.